Hey folks, Zach Osterman here, IU Insider, Indianapolis Star from the visiting coaches booth here at, they changed the stadium name here. Now it's SECU Stadium or Sekou Stadium, possibly. For a while, it was Capital One Field. Anyway, Mike Niziolek, Bloomington General Times. Mike, how are you? You're in the home writers booth at your house.
Yeah, you seem angry. I'm worried about you. You seem upset. You seem perturbed.
Sorry, I just got a text from my wife that one of the boys accidentally locked everyone in one of their bedrooms, and the neighbor had to come free them. So we could be more perturbed. All right, Indiana 55, Maryland 10. I don't know if that somehow that's not going to like explain to anyone where I live, right? I didn't just like give up.
You gave it away. You gave it away. You sound slightly underwater.
Well, I mean, that's all I can really do, unfortunately. I've got the microphone plugged in. They've got like the air.
Duncan, that is true. We should put this on the podcast. Duncan helping out here.
Don't forget. Wait, no. Well, it's not that I forget. It's that I actively don't remember.
Or I thought you were going to say don't want to.
Yeah, well, yeah, pretty much. Anyway,
are we going to do it?
Stop.
No,
We don't have a ton of time. There's a lot of ground to cover. Indiana 55, Maryland 10. Mike, listen, you run out of ways to describe the dominance that you see out of a team like this. They led America in margin of victory coming into this game. It is obviously very difficult for me to imagine that changing after this game. But what I think today captured as much as anything else on the field, and I want to talk a little bit about what was off the field because it interested me too. But on the field was just nothing breaks this team. Like, they had a horrific start. Fernando Mendoza throws a pick on the first drive, and then they just get absolutely steamrolled on the second. Like, second down's a sack, third down, Roman Hemby barely holds onto the ball. Indiana was trying to run a halfback draw, and Roman Hemby barely holds onto the ball. There are injuries pregame, like Aiden Fisher's out, Drew Evans is out. There are injuries that happen in the game, most notably Elijah Surratt, and we'll talk about those a little later. And yet, there is just never a moment when it looks like Indiana is phased. And they just kind of, like, if it's every week, it feels like if it's not one thing, it's another. If it's not this, it's that. If it's not offense, it's defense. If it's not the pass game, it's the run game. Nothing slows this group down. And listen, Maryland was a 3-touchdown underdog. I'm not acting like Indiana did something ridiculously unexpected here. But if you think about, like, if people at this time of year are looking for teams in Indiana's position to slip up, and they're looking to say, like, will this team ever break its focus? Will it ever break its stride? Well, there was plenty of reason for that to happen today, and Indiana just flattened another Big Ten opponent.
David, I don't want to mispronounce your last name. They attempted 3 passes, and that seemed like they didn't even need to in the fourth quarter. About the start, are you going to tell everybody they're in trouble today that you texted like right after that start?
I tweeted I thought they'd have more trouble today than the average, and to be fair, it was harder than UCLA. They were not up 7-0. 2 snaps into the game, and they won by fewer points. So I
did like the response to that tweet.
We're not going to read that out on air. Just come on, you are not locked in. Your focus is not.
This was your analysis. I'm just sharing how off your analysis was at the start of the game. Look, I've said all season, and I go back to this. Seems like every week. I think Mendoza's maybe slipped a little bit in the Heisman race, but I think the focus has been this offense and what this offense has done. Sort of, I think the majority of the story of this season has been about him and the offense. But through 9 weeks now, the one constant, other than maybe like 2 quarters of Michigan State, is this defense is very good. The reason why that start didn't trip them up is because the defense held Maryland to a field goal at the 5-yard line when the possession, they had first and goal from the 5. And then they had the ball at midfield, and Maryland didn't move the ball at all. And so Indiana basically got to reset down 3-0 after, like you said, 8 minutes of disaster on offense. And then the defense, like you said, didn't really force a sack, but still got consistent pressure. Like, it is unfair to have a true freshman quarterback, go up against a Brian Hayes defense. 5 turnovers, interceptions on back-to-back possessions in the first half, fumbles in back-to-back possessions on the second half. And, those 2 turnovers in the second half, that was all she wrote. And it just feels to me that this defense, you have no chance if you're going to go in the red zone and not score touchdowns because you can't really keep up with the offense. But this defense is not going to allow that to happen. And I'm just so impressed, too. Like you mentioned, Aiden Fisher's out the entire game this week. It didn't matter. They still even played 3 linebackers at times, even with multiple injuries at the position. Like they are just plugging and playing guys and rolling through teams at this point. I mean, we should mention the run game discrepancy was 367 to 37. And most of those yards, a lot of those yards came in the fourth quarter, like in the last 2 drives. So, I mean, like utterly dominant. And Washington had the one drive coming out of halftime, but that was it.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the run game, I agree with you a little bit, but like Maryland throws the ball a lot. I think it's more just kind of this idea that like you can't pigeonhole this team into only one or two ways of winning a game. That like I mean, today, for example, we've talked so much about how disruptive this defensive front is this year. Well, they had 3 tackles for loss and no sacks, despite the fact that Maryland ran 33 dropbacks today. And yet, instead, they turn over a Maryland team that I think only had like a small handful of turnovers all season. They turned them over 5 times. So Lake Washington.
Yeah, but I would say caveat to that. Some of those pressures caused some of those.
No. But my point is, you can't. And this is probably more stark on the offense, where Mendoza's a little bit off rhythm. I think Indiana clearly feels the loss of Elijah Surratt, which Indiana's going to hope that's not a long-term thing. But so Indiana just pivots to, we're just going to run the ball down your throat. And we've seen that all season, right? I mean, there have been times where it's all worked offensively or defensively. But my point is, especially when you are, and of course, this will be a little bit different as in when we see Indiana play playoff caliber teams, which, we almost certainly will. Like at this point, I understand Kurt Signetti won't think this way, but given the high degree of confidence we can have in Indiana beating Wisconsin and Purdue, like it does feel a little bit like at very least a place in the playoff was like, one hand and 4 fingers kind of on that at this point. It'll change a little bit, or maybe more than a little bit, when we see Indiana against playoff caliber teams. But when you're Maryland, when you're UCLA, when you're Michigan State, probably even to some extent when you're Penn State, you're looking, that you are starting from behind the 8 ball against this team. And you're looking for ways to say, like, what can we take away? How can we, what poison do we choose to swallow this week? And can we withstand that? And Fernando Mendoza talked about, he said, I wasn't sharp, missed some throws. He took responsibility for the interception. He also said, like, once Surratt went out of the game, Maryland started doing some stuff that was very clearly designed to sort of essentially make Indiana beat them on the ground. The way they were playing some zone coverages, the way they were mixing some things. And Mendoza's point was, so we just beat them on the ground. Again, like to your point, you don't have Aiden Fisher, who, if we are, and the list of these players is long, but if we are listing the players who are most important to Indiana's defense, Fisher is probably at the top. Like, he's the de facto captain. He's the green dot communicator. He is the senior All-American middle linebacker. I mean, that's, there are few players that can be more important than that. And yet Maryland just never had a chance. Like, there was never a moment when about the only time that I thought Maryland had any hope in this game was when they come out and Indiana, a couple defenders fall down. They score that touchdown right after halftime. It's like 4 plays, 75 yards. And you think, okay, like maybe they can get something here. And Indiana just swings back with a 6-play, 63-yard drive, and the game's over. Like, there's just, I don't know where you start with this team if you are not equal on talent plus coaching. I don't know where you start trying to beat this team. And I think that's something that, even as good as Indiana was last year, I don't know that they had that in the same way they do this year. When you look at the way they beat Illinois, for example, when you look at the way they just completely untracked what we thought was a bit of a resurgent UCLA team, I mean, I don't know where you start with this group is basically what I'm trying to say.
Well, I mean, I don't know. We make the podcast into trying to pick to game plan against them. I would say that it's been pretty consistent when you put pressure on this team. Like you can't just do it for one drive. When you consistently speed up Mendoza, he's been more often than not prone to make some mistakes. And so, I mean, it's a tall ask, but I mean, last year when the team sort of generated pressure on Kirsch Rourke consistently, Ohio State, Notre Dame disrupted the pocket. That was sort of the recipe to success. The run game's better this year. The offensive line has been better this year. And so maybe it's a harder thing to do. But I think that's probably where you start. Maryland, it was interesting that you say that I guess I missed kind of what Mendoza said about them changing their game plan. They might have gone too early to that because they were passing pretty well at the start. They looked like they wanted no part. Kalen Black's physicality, he had the one early run where he lowered his shoulder on the guy and put him into the turf. And after that, it really looked like they didn't want to tackle. And, these guys, Hemby, they had three running backs with 80 yards and a touchdown. Kobe Martin comes in the fourth quarter, shines again. I just felt like the effort necessarily wasn't there against the run, especially. I think Cignetti mentioned this in his interview on the field after the game. He's like, in the third quarter, it just felt that they wanted no part of this, they of this run game. And so maybe that's kind of the biggest thing, that you saw the run game kind of disappear for a couple of weeks, but now it appears back. And this was, I think, the most yards since 2016 against ironically, a Maryland, a win over Maryland at Memorial Stadium.
That was a very junky rush game too. Indiana moved a running back to quarterback and a quarterback to running back, and just Maryland was just like, what is going on? And they couldn't stop.
14 yards. Yeah. So that was the last time they had that many. Fans
called it bacon and legs because they moved this big, like 250-pound running back to quarterback. They called it bacon and legs.
They did no trickery here. I mean, it was just literally just up the middle and pounding on people, and it worked. But to your point, defensively, it's hard to find a weakness. Like you said, on their big touchdown play, I mean, multiple guys got tripped up and fell down. I mean, it was just a sort of a unlucky. It was like, what do? You sort of pick yourself off and go to the next play, and that's what they did. But I mean, that was it, man. Like, I mean, it was really hard to find, holes here. Like you said, they were playing at less than 100%. Fisher's, has got the earphones on the sideline, kind of just plugged in and kind of coaching, and none of it mattered.
Well, I guess that was kind of my point. Is just like, I mean, because I think the run game at times disappeared maybe last month, in part because teams were trying to say Fernando Mendoza is going to be like Michigan State, for example. It felt like there was a concerted effort to say Mendoza is going to beat us. And now it's, Indiana faced a lot more unloaded boxes today. And I don't know if this was apparent but from the press box, especially in the first half, I was looking down and I was seeing, just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 instead of 7. Instead of having that extra body in the box. Maryland was not adding the extra body against the run, basically.
No.
And Curt Cignetti said something interesting that I think people don't think about a lot, and it is very fair. He said you don't normally see a dominant running performance manifest itself until the third quarter, when you've leaned on a team for half a game and you've worn them down physically. And I mean, like the snap count in this game was lopsided. It was 75-50. Indiana had the ball for more than 40 minutes, and it was really even more lopsided in the first half when the game was still kind of in the balance. Like Maryland couldn't stay on the field, in part because of the turnovers. Indiana was just kind of pounding them, between the tackles. I don't know where. I just don't know where you kind of start with this group. If you're Maryland, certainly if you're Wisconsin, if you're Purdue, and again, probably to at least a certain extent, if you're Penn State. I don't know if today was maybe a little bit of light bursting through the clouds for Penn State, or if it was a little bit of a death rattle for this season. They were down 17-14 at halftime in Columbus and then didn't score again. Listen, like there are statistical measures for this team's dominance, and we go through them every week. And I guess the point I'm trying to make in that regard is it feels like it's something a little different every week. Like one week it's, wow, Fernando Mendoza was great. Another week it's, man, the ground game was great. One week it's, wow, 5 sacks. Another week it's 5 turnovers, whatever. But the constant is that this team plays like it is just chasing something that it knows it will not get any one Saturday. But Mikael Kamara talked about this after the game. He said, and I'm trying to remember exactly what he said. I'll have to paraphrase it, but I thought it was interesting. Somebody kind of asked him basically if there were moments last season when, I don't think they said like, did it get to your head? But there were moments when, were there moments when, like it almost became like too easy in a way? And Kamara kind of said yes. And he kind of said like that, it's, I think where he basically landed with the answer was, we are constantly chasing that motive, or we are constantly motivated to chase that idea that we're never going to give anybody the opening to say, well, it's just Indiana. Like I think that was essentially what he was saying, was we're never going to give anybody the chance to sort of dismiss us again, the way that they kind of got to last year. And we've talked about the ways this team is probably better than it was a year ago. That the defense is better, the offensive, both lines of scrimmage are better, that Fernando Mendoza has his ups and downs, but that he's probably capable of more. Certainly he's going to be less physically limited than Curtis Rourke was a season ago. But I think that, I thought that was an interesting window into this team's, and it's kind of going to tie into some of what I write, I think, post game. It was an interesting window into this team's mentality that there is maybe a motivation to say, after last year, when people not just doubted them, but were given the opportunity after the season to say some of that was fake or some of that was a little bit inflated or didn't count, that this team is motivated to kind of, fire back at that, if that makes sense. And I think you see that in the relentlessness of these performances, and relentless in the sense that they're not trying to run up these scores. They're putting second and third teamers in the game. That they are. I mean, Fernando Mendoza.
I think that's more specific maybe to Kamara than the team at large, because
I mean, he said we. He said we.
Maybe he did, but Cignetti's point, and what Cignetti said, that the team is the mindset he wants the team to have, and he says they're close to being there, is in terms of like none of the circumstances in any given moment matter. Your record, the score, the circumstances, the players on the field.
Then where does the mystical chip on the shoulder come from then?
But I don't think they've talked about that as much. I mean, and yes, I think that's innate to some people. The JMU guys, I think, have that. But even Aiden Fisher has gotten to the point where, like, with the Oregon game, you weren't there for the media availability beforehand. But, like, Aiden Fisher was like, everybody's like, how big is this game? How big is this game? How big is this moment? He's like, it's not a big deal. It's the next moment that we're facing. It's the thing that in the schedule. So I think, by and large, that it's interesting that the juxtaposition where I think Cignetti's attitude falls more in line with Aiden Fisher, that, like, nothing – matters except that 6 seconds at a time, that play. And that's where he thinks that's where I think Cignetti would trace the relentlessness from. Whereas Kamara, I understand, because I think we've talked to Kamara and have like longer conversations about that and where he's come from and kind of the adversity he's faced. And there probably are guys that have that view from JMU, but I mean, you got to also remember there's a lot of transfers on this team that weren't even part of this team last year. So that can't be their motivation necessarily, like that people are going to fall back into this is Indiana, because they didn't even hear that. Pat Coogan, that wasn't part of his ethos. But, it's like, I just think when you hear Curt Cignetti frame their success and frame how they get to a point where they're beating teams on average by 30 or 40 points or whatever the margin of, I don't know the exact margin of victory this year is, that it's that as opposed to, because have you heard Curt Cignetti talk about chip on your shoulder since he got here? Or I mean, even since last year. I mean, that's not been part of his sort of lexicon. And so I get where Kamara's coming from, but I think by and large that the team has reached peak Cignetti, where nothing matters except what's in front of them, and so they're playing in the fourth quarter like it's 0-0 at all times, and that's what the score is.
I mean, I guess, like, I don't want this to get too philosophical because we both got a lot of work to do tonight, but like,
Well,
I think those two,
disagree. It's fine.
well, no, but I think it's more that those two exist side by side because, and what I mean by that is, you can have the focus of a team that is only worried about the immediate task at hand, and also the underlying motivation that makes you play harder or keep your focus.
That noise.
No, hold on, you cut me off. Wait. Then the other team. I don't listen, I'm sorry. There's no way to get a team to play this hard if you've literally turned off everything in their brain other than this robotic insistence on what is next and nothing else. You would not get this kind of effort.
What's in front of you? You win the play in front of you. That's how and it stacks. 1 to 150. That's what he says. Are you paying attention? And all his quotes. He said these things a few times.
I know, but the motivation comes from somewhere. The motivation comes from somewhere deeper than just
yes, but
the
I don't
next
think
snap.
it's necessarily true for every guy in the roster. I think Kamara. I know what he's talking about when he says chip to shoulder versus, but I think a lot of the guys have bought into the Signetti of it all. That we're on this plane of existence. Just we're gonna see ball win and next play, and we just have to win every one. And they by and large have. Hard to argue, right?
No, yeah, because I'm right. It's hard to argue because I'm right.
They're in trouble. That's all. I'll frame the text and send it to Kurt Signetti.
We're gonna leave it there because I got to do this and then get all the way back down to Reagan for a morning flight. Plus, at a certain point, man, I'm not trying to be flippant.
Well, here, one question for you, real quick.
Yeah.
The Heisman Mendoza campaign and candidacy. Is it teetering? Is it teetering, or is it the team success overwhelm his individual numbers sort of falling back?
I think it's. Honestly, he's held back a little bit by the nature of these games. It's a little bit his performances, no doubt. He would have told you he wasn't great today. Yeah. He had in total he was 14 to 21 passing, 201 passing yards. If you want to throw in his rushing yards, he had 225 total yards and 2 touchdowns. But there's also I pulled this stat out this week for something I did on the YouTube channel, and if you include today, he's thrown 36 passes in the fourth quarter this season, and 9. I believe the number is 9 of those have come in games that weren't Old Dominion, Iowa, and Oregon. Part of what's because we talked about this is inflating his numbers or whatever that. And I think last week he wasn't great. I think today was a little bit affected by losing Surratt and the way that Maryland kind of shifted as it tried to sort of capitalize on Indiana not having Elijah Surratt. But he only attempted 21 passes. You're going to lose a Heisman candidacy if you don't get the opportunity to throw. If you're a quarterback and you're a Heisman candidate, and you listen, he's mobile, but he's not Diego Pavia, right? He's not going to run for 125 a game or something like that. You're going to lose a Heisman candidacy when you just don't need to throw the ball that much. And I think that what's going to happen is this stuff's going to go back and forth a little bit. Julian saying, I think is going to go up a level in the Heisman conversation this week. But we've had this conversation about Julian saying at other times this year where he's just not getting numbers because Ohio State is winning other ways. And if Fernando Mendoza has a couple more big games, I think at very least he's probably going to wind up in New York. Because if you are as good as he's been for a team that goes 12-0 or 12-1 or whatever, 13-0, you're going to be in that situation. I also think I am kind of coming around to the idea that the Big Ten championship game might be a bit of a Heisman decider, that we could get to a place, depending on what happens with Ty Simpson and maybe Diego Pavia. Vanderbilt did lose today, but it was probably his best game of the year. You could see a world where this, because listen, these awards are always a little bit narrative driven, and I know that frustrates people, and I totally get it. But you could see a world where the narrative eventually evolves into if one of those two, Mendoza or Sayin, has a big game against the other in Indy, with the votes due 48 hours later, that could decide it too. I think these last couple games have undeniably.
He needs another big game where he's allowed to put up some numbers.
Right.
I
I think it's fair to say that he has not played to his best these last couple games, but I think you also used an important word there, which is allowed, because he's not being allowed to put up these numbers because, in a game like this, if Maryland's going to play a bunch of a soft zone and unload the box, why aren't you just going to run over them? Of course that's what you're going to do. Like that's, and the minute you start forcing stats, the minute you start saying we need to throw the ball 38 times so Fernando can get the Heisman.
He has to be, and like he was a couple weeks ago where he only threw it 4 incompletions and threw more touchdowns. Like it makes you have to be perfect on every throw. And when you have an average day, it stands out more when you only attempt 21 passes. I just think he's running out of runway. He probably needs at least, maybe 1.5 sort of big quarters or big games to try to make that force the Big Ten championship game to sort of be winner take all. Because, sure. And I think we're in the same camp, but I think he's falling behind a little bit as we kind of get past these weeks. And it's like, he's okay. But I mean, I do think he should be the beneficiary of the team's overall success. So that'll keep him in longer than maybe he would have. But at some point you got to put, the numbers do matter in this category. And so
here's the thing. Here's the thing. No one's putting up great numbers this year. Like that's and like we don't need to turn this into a Heisman conversation, but like no one is. I saw somebody tweet out before this weekend that like of all the recognized Heisman contenders, Mendoza was on track for the most touchdown passes, and it was like 39 or 40. And then if you go back and look, like Cam Newton had 48 and Joe Burrow had 56 and whatever, like that. There's not somebody doing that this year. Now, someone might separate themselves, and to be fair, it could be Mendoza. I mean, like it's not at all outside the realms that he throws 11 touchdowns in the last 3 games when you look at some of the teams that he's going to face. But you go back to that Michigan State game, we said after that game, Michigan State made a conscious effort not to lose the line of scrimmage and not to lose to Indiana's run game. So Fernando Mendoza goes for a huge number through the air. These last 2 weeks, and especially today, I thought it was pronounced and by the way, Maryland also has a pretty good pass rush. Not great, but for a 4-4 team, they are good rushing the passer. Maryland made a conscious effort to say, especially with your number 1 receiver out, we're not going to let you beat us. We're not going to let the quarterback beat us. And so Indiana just pivoted to the other thing. And that's where I said, I think team success alone can probably ride Mendoza all the way to New York. He can't win it on team success alone. He's got to have at least a couple more big games. And it would really help because he's already had a couple of these moments, but not everybody gets the opportunity for one more. And you've made the point about timing. It would really help if Indiana gets to Indianapolis and he comes off that field and Indiana's won the Big Ten championship. And also, too, he's like, I mean, even if he's like 225 and 3 touchdowns, and Indiana's won the Big Ten title, that's a moment. That those are good numbers, and that's a moment. But there's still a lot to play out. He wasn't at his best today. I also thought there was a lot of this is what Maryland's going to let us do, so we're just going to do it.
I just think you've only got so many games left to play, and so when you're in this group that's people are struggling to separate yourself at this time of year. If you can't break through and you're kind of going the opposite direction, it's going to be tough. But like you said, the Big Ten title game will give him that opportunity. But like I said, I think he still needs at least one more big game, and we'll see. Because like you said, if you're only averaging 3 quarters a game, and in the second half you're not even asked to throw, it's you have a very limited window into what you can do. So it's not all his fault. But like on a day where he's not great, it's hard to elevate yourself when you only get, like I said, 21 opportunities. And as somebody put out in the comments, that was a tough layout to make the catch. Not going to blame Omar Cooper, but a couple drops that maybe would have pushed his numbers all the much higher.
He's Mike Niziolek. I'm Zach Osterman. This has been Mind Your Banners Postgame for Indiana 55, Maryland 10. Hoosiers are back next week in State College against Penn State. Mike will be there. I will not see him in Chicago because I will be actively driving away as he's running down Madison, waving his arms in the air. But thank you all for watching. Thank you, everyone at home who watched us on the YouTube channel or listened wherever you get your podcasts. We will be back midweek, as we always are, for Mind Your Banners. We'll talk to you soon.